Welcome to Play by Podcast, a podcast all about online roleplay. I'm your host, Leslie, and this is the very first episode. This episode will touch on the history of roleplay, how it started, where it is now, describe exactly what play by post means, and how online roleplay has impacted my life. I am very excited to talk about this as I have been role-playing since I was about 15. And I know there are plenty of people out there who enjoy discussions surrounding this particular hobby. This is my first time also attempting a podcast, so I'm kind of nervous, but also equally as excited. So yeah, let's dive right on in. So first, let's talk about what RPG or roleplay games is. RPG stands for role-playing game. It is a game in which a participant or player assumes the role of a character that can interact within the game's imaginary world. Role-playing has been around for millennia, from historical reenactments by ancient Romans, the Han Chinese, and medieval Europeans, to improv featured in commedia dell'arte in the 16th century, to training in the military, education, and medical fields. In the 1960s to early 70s, fantasy elements were used in war games resembling modern LARP or live action roleplay. Now, Dungeons and Dragons, that's what everybody immediately thinks of when you mention roleplay. It is commonly referred to as D&D. Now, that is a fantasy tabletop role-playing game, originally created and designed by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. This game was first published in 1974 by Tactical Studies Rules, or TSR. Now, this was the beginning of a boom in tabletop roleplay, and it spawned an entire corner of cottage industry gaming, which is essentially when you have people at home and you just sit down and do things in your house or cottage. This type of roleplay later influenced video games, books, and even television. Now, online text-based roleplay games date to 1978 with the creation of MUD, or Multi-User Dungeon, by Roy Trubshaw and Richard Bartle at the University of Essex. While some are video games, this podcast will focus on text-based communication on internet forums and social media and networking sites. Now, we're going to talk about play-by-post. What is it? Essentially, players post messages on forums, chats, blogs, what have you, and then other players post role-played responses. There are a couple different formats that people can follow, the first being script. Now, this is dialogue only or very little action. You see character A says, I'm going to go over and check out that spooky treasure chest. And then they wait for someone to say, okay, character B says, wait, maybe we should check out if there are any traps protecting that chest. And it's a very quick back and forth between the two. Now, another format is the story format. Now, this is the one where I am most familiar and where I really want to hone in on. This is where everything is mentioned. You're talking about action, surroundings, dialogue, a general idea of what's going on, maybe some internal dialogue, maybe some, exposition. This is really where a writing passion comes into play. You could really go ham when you get into it, depending on your level of inspiration in the moment. So that's really where my experience comes into play. Now, I will say, when I first started roleplay, back when I was a wee baby, around 14 or 15 years old, it was a very quick, what we call one-liners. And it is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. You post a line, whether it's dialogue or action, and then you wait for somebody else to come in and post another one in response. again, that's more of like the script format. It's a very quick back and forth. It gets things moving very, very quickly. And then there's little, I would say, like little thought put into it. You just want to act and do things. As I dipped my toes further into the realm of role play, I discovered that most people really enjoy getting into the beauty of writing, getting into the passion of writing, really developing your writing skills. And soon enough, I was starting to churn out 500 words. Of course, a lot of it is very flowery, and you can get caught up in making things sound pretty, but I digress. Going back to what play by post is in general, there's no rules really, but most players do have an understanding of basic etiquette. And they may list their own guidelines to ensure that every member is on the same page and they can hold each other to that standard. For instance, like, hey, all characters must be over the age of 18, and then don't jump in and presume to know what another character is going to do. Give that player the option of responding to your character, because you don't want to go into what we call god modding or god moding, which is where you just basically take charge of the whole interaction, and it really makes things less fun for the players in general. Play by post is available for most genres and fandoms, but if there isn't anything out there, the ability to create another one is very, very easy, because all you need to do is essentially create another board, but you do have to have a hosting site. Now, speaking of hosting sites, some of the most popular ones, let's say, actually, the one that started it all for me, I started on what's called Envision Free. And that dates back to, I'm going to say 2002. But it did migrate to Zeta boards in 2011. And then in 2018, everything was moved to Tapatalk. And then both Envision Free and Zeta boards were deactivated. Now, I don't personally know anyone who uses those forums anymore. What I mainly use is what's called JSync. And that was founded in 2000, and their domain was released in 2002. Another one is ProBoards. Now, this one was founded in 2000, and it has so many sites that it hosts that it's considered one of the largest websites on the internet. Most players generally don't have a big preference between the two, but I think if you're interested in the coding aspect, I think that does lend to more of a preference, depending on if you want to be more hands-on, have the ability to really be on top of what your forum looks like, versus if you want something that's kind of, I don't want to say cookie cutter, but it's more, I would say, user-friendly to those who aren't as well-versed in coding. Now, when someone creates a forum or a board, as we say, generally it does have an overall setting or plot. And then the site itself is run by admins, administrators. And they sometimes have moderators to help if there's a large amount of, maintenance, upkeep, or you do have a lot of members, and it helps to spread out the workload. Now, while most forums do have an overall setting or plot, there are what we call sandbox sites. This is like a free-for-all. You're on the playground, there's a big sandbox. You come in and you just play to your heart's content. There's nothing to hold you there. There's no general setting that you have to create your characters to fit in. You just kind of just create your character as you imagine them in that moment, and then see if anybody wants to play with them. That can be fun if you have a particular itch that you want to scratch, but you don't want to go through the process of creating a character for a specific plot in a specific setting. It's kind of like a create and go. There are other mediums for role playing. Back in the day, we had AOL and Yahoo, instant messaging, AIM and Yim. You would do chat based role playing. So that was pretty fun. Some people also utilize social media websites like Tumblr, and X, or formerly Twitter. These are more rapid fire things generally. Um, some people even use Discord, which is another instant messaging. I mean, it's much more than an instant messaging platform, but that's my experience, has been a way to communicate with other people is using instant messaging. And then, privately shared documents. Some people have gone so far as to create like a shared Google folder, and, you can go in and add your post when you're ready, or even further back. Some people would email one another, and that was play by email versus play by post, and that's a separate category, but that's definitely an option. Now, with my experience, I started role playing back in, I wouldn't say 2004, maybe 2005, on a Harry Potter forum. um, this board was mainly discussions of like the books and the movies, where people would jump in. And again, this was back right when the movies were kind of getting their ramp up. And I'm this 14-15-year-old kid, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with Harry Potter. I want to talk about all the books, all the movies. I want to get involved with the fandom and just have a good time. But this particular board had a section for role play. And I looked at this and I was like, what the heck is this? What is role play? What are people doing in here? What are people posting? This is I've never heard of this. So I go in and I read, and I'm like, oh my God, these people are pretending to be characters in the Harry Potter universe, which blew my mind. I was like, I had no idea you could do this. And that people found an actual interest in doing this. So I just kind of jumped in. It was it was the Wild West out there. Some people were uh, wanting to play canon characters, which canon, for those of you who don't know, is those established in the lore, like Harry Potter, Hermione, Ron, so and so forth. Um, a lot of other people wanted to create what we call OCs, or original characters, that interacted with either the canon characters or other people's original characters, and just exist in like Hogwarts or Hogsmeade, Diagon Alley, or the general universe in which Harry Potter exists. Um, it was the coolest thing. And during that time, it's your formative years as a teenager, really, 14, 15, you're coming in hot, you're learning about the world. And that was also when the internet really started picking up. So I met a ton of people who were exactly like me, wanting to jump in and write and just have fun uh, in this way. And it's like it became a hobby. I will say that my family likely worried a little bit about me sitting at the computer all day. Rightfully so, being over 30 now and seeing what the internet has become. Like, I would probably have a little bit of worry over what my uh, teenage daughter was doing online for hours on end and not going out and spending time with her real life friends. So I get that. But for me, in my headspace, I was meeting all new kinds of people that just wanted to write. And that was really cool. So from that platform, that's where I started to discover the actual forum-based role play. So it wasn't just a small part on like a Harry Potter discussion forum. It was a whole entire site that had like a plot and a setting, and all the different subforums and everything were just different like locations or whatever in that particular universe. That's where I started, was Envision Free, like I mentioned earlier. Um, and it was really eye opening, and there was a steep learning curve. I didn't know what it meant to create a character and fill out what we call an application, which is essentially just a brief, sometimes not brief, but depending on where you are, overview of who the character is, their history, personality, any relationships they have, basically who they are and how they fit into this setting. I had to learn what that was, which, it can be daunting. And even now, I will admit it is sometimes a lot of work, depending on how much effort you want to put into it. But I think the effort that you put into it you're rewarded with what you get out of it. I also had no idea what any basic etiquette was, because again, I had come from a very small like subsection of people who were just doing quick one-liners back and forth, and then just it, like I said, it was a wild west in role play. There's things like tagging, when you only want to do an interaction with one other character, you tag them and say, hey, we're doing this just us. I had no idea what that meant, so I jumped in to a thread, which is what we call it, and I was like, oh hey, my character jumps in, and they did not appreciate that. They were like, who are you? What are you doing? So yeah, I had to learn a lot of the basic etiquette and the rules as I went. But in those days, I think a lot of people were discovering it, because online roleplay was relatively new. Google had only been around for, I want to say, like 6 years at that point, because it came out in 98, I think, 97, 98. Yeah, that was fun. But eventually, I did find my way. I learned how to navigate online roleplay, what is expected of you as a writer, as a player, as a member. And, I learned I adapted. Generally, I stuck to Harry Potter forums, because that was my most, that was my obsession at the time, as it was a lot of people's. And it was what I was most comfortable with. So, yeah, I stuck with Harry Potter for a while. And then once that became sort of the norm, it became like kind of boring. I tried my hand at some real life forums, where the setting was set in like a modern day, no magic, no Harry Potter, like it's just real life. And then there was an aspect of like crime. So think of like your favorite TV show that is like Law and Order, or like The Godfather. It may not be directly pertaining to those specific situations, but it's the idea of, hey, there's crime going on. You could play a criminal. You could play someone in law enforcement. You could play just a regular citizen. And that was really, really neat. Basically, online role play really helped me creatively, as well as like my writing skills. It greatly improved as I surrounded myself with writers who were like on par with me or better. And that was the coolest thing, because I read everything that they wrote and I was like blown away. Like, how could someone write this good? How can someone write words this beautiful, this eloquent? And I just wanted to be exactly like that. So I really pushed myself to step up and, step up my writing game. And like I said, it was an outlet for my creativity. I am a creative person by nature. I want to create things. I want to flex that particular metaphorical muscle. I'm not like a math person, and I love words, and writing always brings me peace and pleasure. So, I got to flex that part. I got to create characters within a world, which takes a certain level of imagination, and then have them interact with other characters, come up with an idea for them to interact, come up with an overall, like, plot to follow, a storyline to follow. So, there's a bunch of people doing the same thing. Um, and it becomes a community. It's a lot of us refer to it as collaborative storytelling, because that's what it is. You create the narrative post by post, and I think that's beautiful. I think it's a great way for people to connect, um, and just explore that side of themselves that they may not get to do in their personal life. Um, I have built some lasting friendships because of it. Like, there are some people that I met back in the early days that I'm still friends with to this day. I mean, we're all over 30 now, and we all have our own particular lives. Some of us have gotten married, some have had kids, some, like myself, have then gotten divorced. Real life stuff. And so sometimes the hobby, as it is, has to take a back seat to it. But that doesn't mean that those friendships uh, were no longer like viable. I've met a lot of them in real life, and I'll have to tell my story in particular of how role play made me move across halfway across the country. But I think that I'll save that for a future episode. Got to keep y'all on your toes on that one. But yeah, it was my hobby, whereas everyone else was uh, doing, like, playing instruments, or, I mean, I did golf at one point, but that's a whole new thing. Sports, um, reading books. I was on the computer writing with some strangers, some who became close friends. Um, Now, like I said, real life does happen, and a lot of the times you need a break, because this hobby is one that, man, it can take a toll, especially when you have like a lot of characters and you have a lot of posts to reply to, and sometimes it can become overwhelming. So I've had to take some breaks, some sabbaticals. I think at one point I took time off for like a year and a half, but I've always come back to it because like I said, I've always loved writing, and this is a great way to flex that creative muscle. Um, yeah, it's pretty cool. On the next episode of Play by Podcast, I will talk more about my experience with online roleplay, some favorite sites that I've had, favorite characters, favorite plots, um, and how it's actually changed over the years since I first got into it back in the early 2000s. Also, I would love to hear from fellow role players. I'll be sharing this podcast and the pilot episode with those I currently write with, as well as some directory boards or resource boards that I've mentioned it to. So if you want to tell your story, send me a message. I could, you know, get a sort of interview situation set up. We could, talk, do some back and forth. If you're not comfortable with that, I totally get it. This community is shy by nature. We're great with words, but actually speaking to people like in person can be pretty daunting. So you can also feel free to write your experience, and then send that to me directly, and I can just read it. We can easily talk more about what that would look like if you're interested. So until next time, bye.